Blended Podcasts. Brought to you by Blended Audio.
What does a healthy, balanced lifestyle consist of? How should you eat? What exercise should you be doing? How many hours of sleep do we really need? Does too much water flush away all your vitamins? Should it be high carb, low fat, or high fat, low carb? The more research you do, the more confusing it gets, because there is so much information out there, and there are so many conflicting opinions. So how are we supposed to know? Stick around to explore the different approaches to health with us, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and let's try to figure out together what the heck being healthy really means. I am your host, Hazel Priscilla, and this is your weekly dose of Feed Me Honesty. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Feed Me Honesty. So last week, Massimo Meneghetti and myself talked a bit about the importance of sleep, why sleep is so important, how sleep works, and this week we're going to talk a bit more about what the realities of sleep are, how we can make it a more doable thing, and how we can make sure we get enough sleep. Because Professor Matthew Walker even goes as far as saying that if you're not sleeping 8 hours a night, you are basically killing yourself. So yeah, back in studio I have Massimo Meneghetti. Hello Massimo, and welcome
Hello
back.
Hazel, and thank you for having me back.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, what Professor Matthew Walker actually said was shorter sleep, shorter life.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
basically you're killing yourself if you're not sleeping 8 hours.
yeah, and we've mentioned him a couple of times up till now. He is one of the leading experts in sleep
So he's
science.
a scientist.
He's a scientist, and he's one of the most respected sleep research experts, because sleep is one of those fields where you have a lot of different contrasting opinions, and almost no one has a full picture of what's really going on. So you kind of have to start relying on the best fit. And currently, as far as I can understand, Professor Matthew Walker is leading the conversation on sleep science, and his research is the most pertinent and the most valuable.
Okay.
So when he says shorter sleep, shorter life, I'm inclined to listen to him.
I hear you. And we also have some, facts proving that there are actually, like we spoke about, the accidents increasing and the heart attacks increasing when you don't get enough sleep. So, he's not just saying these things.
Absolutely. There's some empirical evidence for this. And there's quite a lot of it, because huge amounts of the population engage in daylight savings every year. Well, huge amounts of the global population engage in daylight savings every year. But I feel like episode 1 was a bit of a terrifying episode.
Yeah.
It made it sound like that
Shock
if you
effect.
don't... Yeah, shock effect, which is good. It's a good thing to understand the true impact of lack of sleep and the true impact of good sleep. But also, I think that once you know that, it's also important to be able to just bring this down into normal life, day-to-day life for people.
Yeah.
Because as much as we want to try, it is very rare that you get a full 7 hours of sleep per night. And that kind of means we're all operating on a back foot. So one of the first things they discover when you don't sleep is a change in appetite. And what happens is that you have these two hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin is the chemical that your stomach produces, the hormone your stomach produces. When your belly's full, that sends up to your brain to tell you that you're full and you must stop eating. Ghrelin is the hormone that you produce that makes you hungry. It's the foraging hormone. It's the one that makes you alert and produces cortisol and makes you go out and get some food. So what happens, one of the first things that happens when you don't sleep is that you have an underproduction of leptin, meaning you feel less full, with an overproduction of ghrelin, meaning you feel less full and more hungry. And if you just sleep again, if you miss the 7-hour cutoff by 1 hour, you eat up to 200 to 300 more calories a day.
Which is a lot, hey? That's a lot of food.
It's a hell of a lot of food, and people are already overeating anyway.
Yeah. Just to add to that, so one of the other sources that I want to bring in was Satguru. So this is a guru from India.
Right.
And he has a whole different side to the whole sleeping thing, which I'll get into later, but he also agrees on the on the eating thing. He says that most people eat at least 50% more than they need to eat. And that means that the body has to process so much more food, and this extra processing takes a toll on the system. So your body has to work so much harder. That's why you're more tired and stuff. Like sometimes you think, oh, I need to eat is energy. But sometimes when you eat too much, you're causing your body to work very hard, which means you're going to be more tired and there's going to be less energy to do other things because your body is so busy trying to digest all of this food. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's unfortunately a little bit of a double-edged sword. It would be so nice if it was just a case of eat less,
sleep more.
Will not eat less, sleep more, eat less, higher performance, more efficient performance in the body kind of thing. But unfortunately, what happens when you don't sleep, the reason you eat more calories, and interestingly, they've discovered the reason you're drawn to things like carbs and sugars.
Yeah. And that's so relatable because we all know when you're tired, you just want to eat a chocolate, or you just want to drink
pizza,
like coffee with sugar or bread or donuts or whatever.
Exactly,
all know those cravings.
Exactly, and it's not your mind. If you haven't slept and you see a donut and it just feels like you need that donut, that's not just something happening in your mind. That's actually your body telling you that you need more carbohydrates, because another important thing that happens when you don't sleep is your serotonin and dopamine productions plummet.
So serotonin is your feel-good hormone, am I right?
Both of them are feel-good hormones, but serotonin is the feel-good hormone, and then dopamine is the high hormone.
So that's also why lack of sleep can be related to depression and, bad mood and stuff like that. We all know that too, feeling grumpy because we didn't sleep enough.
Absolutely.
Or having a short temper.
Exactly. So what's actually happening is that your body is incapable of producing the amount of serotonin and dopamine you need for emotional function. And it knows that carbohydrates form the building blocks needed to create these neurotransmitters. So it's not necessarily a situation of eat carbs, make serotonin. It's more of a situation of eat carbs and provide the body with the necessary equipment to make serotonin.
Okay.
But your brain and your body knows that.
Yes.
So that's why you start overloading on carbs, and that's why you start being drawn to more unhealthy foods when you sleep.
So lack of sleep kind of puts us in this mean cycle, because now we're more hungry, so we eat more, but now our body has to work so much harder to digest all of that food. So now we're more tired, and then we eat more because we're more tired, and then our body needs to work harder because it's, so it's like a cycle, and the only way to get out of that cycle is to sleep more.
Well, ideally, the only way to get out of that cycle is to sleep more, but on a more relatable day-to-day level, you can do little things to help improve your cognitive function. So when you know you have had a bad night of sleep, start in the morning, pack yourself a nice big tub of fruit, or buy some nice fruit on the way to the office.
So sugar, you need sugar, but just try to eat healthier sugar. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, exactly. So this is not a cure-all. This is not going to mitigate the effects of not sleeping. All it is it's
helping you get by.
Getting
through the day.
And you're taking an unhealthy process and at least just adding some healthy benefits to it. Then there's also something I'll touch on very briefly now, but perhaps revisit later in another episode, is reducing your carb intake overall. So reducing your carb intake overall until the point where you eat less than 30 grams of carbs per day is a state called ketosis. So ketosis and the ketogenic diet's super hot, big buzzword at the moment. Everyone thinks it's the future.
That's literally the one diet I know nothing about. I know everything about all the different diets, but that's the one I seem to miss. I don't know how that happened, but I'm definitely going to get you back to talk about that, because I'm really interesting to hear what it's all about.
What it is, well, I would love to, but very simply.
You follow a keto diet yourself, more or less?
Yes,
Okay.
I've been in. So a keto diet just means that you're in a state of ketosis.
Okay.
And the state of ketosis just means that your body is burning fat instead of carbohydrates for fuel.
Okay.
So I've been in a state of ketosis for about a year now, and there's benefits and negatives and whatever, which we can discuss later. But in terms of sleep, following that kind of diet or any kind of lower carb lifestyle will just decrease the frequency of energy peaks and dips in your day. So if you are not sleeping and you follow a high carb diet, you're going to wake up, you're going to get a lack of a sandwich, a toasty or a burger or whatever. You're going to eat that burger, you're going to feel great until about 11 in the morning. Then you're going to
Dip again.
You need to eat some more. If you are on a lower carb, more fat-based diet, your body somewhat bypasses those dips just because you have a natural store of fat and lipids to burn through. So it's quite an extreme thing to do to just switch to the keto diet because you're not sleeping.
Yeah.
But it is just a important thing to note for people who have, who know that they're going to have interrupted sleep schedules for an extended period of time. You've just had a baby, you've just got a new stressful job, or any of those things.
So what about just making your first meal of the day like a lower carb meal instead of like jumping to the keto diet, the first meal? Because I think if you eat carbs first thing in the morning, you're going to crave more and more of them later in the day. But if you get a satisfying first meal of the day, maybe that'll make your choice later in the afternoon, a naturally more healthy choice anyway.
Yeah,
because
I think that's actually a really good suggestion for people. The science isn't necessarily settled on this. This is one of those things that they're still studying. But as far as the evidence tells us at the moment, that's a very good strategy.
So what kind of breakfast would that be then? Like some avocado?
Well, yeah, you could do fruits. Fruits always good.
Fruit.
Whole grains are also always brilliant. Pulses, legumes, even though they're carbohydrates, they're slow release carbohydrates.
That's wonderful.
Seeds and nuts, fantastic. Meat, also not too bad. Bacon and eggs for breakfast, if you haven't slept, is actually going to do a lot more for your brain than a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
This is another important thing to note, is that coffee has a very specific effect on you once you have lack of sleep. All that caffeine does when you have had 7 hours or less than 7 hours of sleep, is it increases your reflex time. So it's purely physical things, not giving you any cognitive benefits. The cognitive benefits you're feeling are just from being stimulated.
So coffee's not necessarily bad. You're not really saying it's bad. You're just not saying it's not a fix for
absolutely.
not sleeping.
Yeah. Look, don't drink too much coffee if you're not sleeping, because that's also going to mess you up.
And not before bedtime, hey?
Yeah, so 5 hours. 5 hours.
Oh wow,
is the
that's a
cutoff.
long time. I definitely am not doing that.
Well, that's if you have a problem with caffeine and sleep.
Yeah.
If you can have a cup of coffee just before bed and pass out, that's totally fine.
Yeah. But it's probably also a trained thing. Like, I've done it so long. I don't drink coffee right before I go to bed, but probably like an hour or two before I go to bed. But I'm so used to it because I've been doing it all my life. So if I stop and then probably try to do it again, I'll feel the effects of it.
Might be a bit of a different situation. But yeah, if you are generally struggling with sleep, 5 hours before bedtime is a good cutoff for caffeine. Yeah, that's when your caffeine dip starts.
Okay. So other tips that you have for us to, curb the lack of sleep?
Well, the one thing, there are some supplements that you can investigate. And supplement research in this department is incredibly lacking. There's a lot of snake oil going around. There's a lot of stuff that does a whole lot of nothing. But there is some stuff that does some interesting things that they don't quite understand why or how or any of those things. They just can observe that it works. So to start very basically, you can always get scaletium. Scaletium is a local South African plant used by the Khoi Bushmen quite a lot. And it is a very subtle serotonin enhancer. So all it does is boost your serotonin levels in your body.
So that helps with the bad mood part of not sleeping.
Yeah, and it also gives you a few cognitive increases because the more serotonin you have, the more neurotransmitting capability you have. So your mood increase actually translates to a cognitive increase quite quickly.
Okay.
That's really the only natural one you can get. Beyond that, there are things called nootropics. With certain nootropics, being in the stimulatory category. So some of them are just straight stimulants. They just work differently to the other stimulants that are illegal, things like cocaine. So they will do a similar thing to your brain that coffee does, but it also increases cognitive function.
Okay.
And they think that cognitive function is increased in these nootropics, either by them being stimulants, so you get modafinil and piracetam and class of stimulant nootropics, but then you get non-stimulant nootropics and nootropic stacks. And they think key element in increasing cognitive function in those nootropic stacks is acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is an enzyme that you produce naturally. But they found that when they supplement people with it, their memory improves. Specifically, their immediate situational memory. So you heard me when I said their memory in pricks. I mixed up improves and increases.
Yeah.
Increase in acetylcholine this morning would have made that not happen.
Okay.
So it makes you, again, they don't understand the mechanism.
Like sharper, basically.
Yeah, you're sharper, you're more engaged. Anecdotally, people report words and thought and cognitive function flowing a hell of a lot easier. But the thing with nootropics is you need to be willing for them to fail and for the side effects to be not ideal.
What are the side effects?
Well, okay, so the ones that are non-stimulatory are either going to work for you or they're not going to work for you. So there's no real side effects there. The problem is they're quite expensive and you need to go through a couple of different stacks, as they call them, to figure out exactly what stack works for you. So if you've got the time and the money, that's great, it's brilliant. The stimulatory ones can just have quite bad stimulatory side effects. So modafinil, for example, is wonderful when you're on it, but it increases cognitive function so much that the biggest side effect is that when it wears off, you become depressed at how low your brain is functioning.
Even if you leave it like on a, slowly but surely,
Yeah.
ease yourself out of it.
Yeah. So they've studied something a very popular study drug overseas, because it really does. If you have to cram the night before your test, as we said, that was a terrible idea.
Yeah.
But you're just in the position where you have to do it and you have to get through it. You take some modafinil and it's going to make you capable of doing that. So,
But you're going to be depressed afterwards.
Exactly.
So is it worth it? I don't know.
Yeah, so that's up to the person to
Yeah.
decide, because it's all a trade-off, It's all a trade-off.
Yeah.
You've got to sort of reconsider your start position when you do these things. Because let's say you have a kid now, you're going to sleep 2 to 3 hours a night. That's just going to be the case for a year or two.
Yeah.
So now you've
And
got
that's actually a long time, hey, to not get enough sleep.
incredibly long time. And that's why, like anyone who's a sort of young adult, when their friends have kids, you don't see them. When you do
Yeah.
see them, they're grumpy. They don't want to do
And
anything.
that's when you actually need to be the best version of yourself, because you're setting an example for this little one. You're raising someone who's looking up to you, And children are, even if they don't understand what you're saying always, like they're so tuned to vibrations and energy and stuff. So if you're in a
Absolutely.
bad mood, they obviously feel it. So you don't want to be in a bad mood around your newborn baby.
Absolutely. So now you've got to look at the situation and you've got to say, okay, I am starting from a non-optimal start point. Choices I'm going to make from this start point are all going to have some sort of adverse effects, but are those adverse effects better or worse than the adverse effects from a start point? And that's really what it comes down to when choosing diet and supplement and all of these things for sleep, because you may be willing to eat the 300 extra calories of carbohydrates per day because you go to the gym.
Yeah.
So you're going to be gaining weight consistently while you're not sleeping, but you're working out and you're going to be turning that weight into muscle mass. Or conversely, you might know that you never get into the gym.
Yeah.
So you just got to
Especially
limit yourself
if you
from
have a
those
little
sweets
one.
and chockies. Exactly. Exactly. So you've just got to force yourself to be limited from those sweets and chockies. And either one is a trade-off.
Yeah.
But there are trade-offs that make your day-to-day living experience a little bit easier.
Yeah. Something I can actually also add to this, like what you can do to help a bit, is something that the guru also said, is that sleep is only one form of rest. And although you really need it, I don't know how you feel about naps, but there are things like just sitting in quiet, taking 10 deep breaths. That is such a silly thing, but I've noticed when I can feel myself getting a little anxious or feeling like I need to do this, so goal orientated. Taking literally 10 deep breaths just calms you down. It sends a message to your body that you are, calm and relaxed. Even if you aren't, you can kind of fool your body into thinking that, I am calm, it's okay. And meditation, you hear people talking about meditation a lot. I know you do it, I do it. And I think the people who don't really know what meditation is still have that idea of like sitting that's what most people think, I suppose. Most of them who aren't doing it, but it's literally just quieting your mind and just not thinking of anything, basically, right?
Yeah, well, it's there's many ways to do meditation, but the most scientifically studied is mindfulness meditation.
Yeah.
So there's actually a direct practice of how you create mindfulness meditation, but as you say, all it comes down to is creating a space where you are at rest.
Yeah.
Your consciousness is, and your mind is not focusing on other things. It's not thinking about things. It is simply at rest in the place that it is.
Yeah. So if you haven't ever tried it before, it might not be the easiest thing to suddenly, get a mind that's been so active for all your life to be quiet for once. Is you get guided meditation. That's a good start, like Headspace. Everybody knows about Headspace these days, but if you don't already, it's like an app you can download, and you just basically are guided. They'll tell you what to do. Think of this, or take a deep breath, or whatever else. So I really think meditation is something that sometimes 10 minutes of meditation can make me feel more rested than sleeping a whole night. Although I know it's not true. And I'm not saying you don't need that night's rest still, but if, like you said, worst case scenario, if you really can't, there are little things that you can do, and meditation is definitely one of those.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't take a lot of time. You can't say you don't have 10 minutes or 15. It literally 15 minutes a day.
And Headspace actually has walking meditations, eating meditations.
Oh, really? I didn't even know.
Yeah, if you legitimately don't have the 10 or 15 minutes, you can do a meditation while you eat your lunch, which is good. Again, it's not going to fix the cognitive issues of not sleeping, but it's just going to make the experience of living with those a lot easier. And then also, just to quickly touch on napping. Proper napping is called prophylactic napping. And prophylactic napping is a siesta. So a late afternoon nap for about an hour or two. And they found that can immediately improve.
Oh, really? I was really wondering about that. I'm glad you brought it up again, because, yeah.
Oh.
Something I want to talk about is Mel Robbins, who's an author and motivational speaker. I think it really ties in here. So basically, she has this, she teaches this to people, saying that based on science, you should never, ever, ever hit the snooze button because it impacts your brain function. And here's what they say. We sleep in cycles of about 75 to 90 minutes. That is what we already said in the previous episode. And then after a few cycles, 2 to 4, if, that's a full night's sleep, your brain gets ready to wake up. The last 2 hours before you wake up, your brain's basically ready to wake up after the 2 or 4 sleep cycles. If you naturally wake up or your alarm goes off during these 2 hours where your body is kind of ready to wake up, your brain and body is ready to be awake. But if you at this point hit the snooze button and doze off for another 9 or 15 minutes, your brain starts another sleep cycle, which then obviously lasts 75 or 90 minutes. And then if you therefore wake up after snoozing for a few minutes, your brain is still trapped in a sleep cycle, and it will take you about 4 hours after waking up to shake that off. And the only way to shock yourself awake in that case is to take a cold shower. So, Massimo, I know you don't agree with this, but tell us why.
So it's not me who doesn't agree, it's the scientists. The men in white coats. Specifically, I read an article.
Although she says this is based on science,
Yeah.
but they don't specify what science
Which
it's
science?
based on.
Yeah.
But anyway,
So really, this ties into my initial point at the beginning of this episode, in that This is one of those things where it can either be Arthur or Martha. The science is just not settled at this point. But seemingly, the more evidence-backed side of this, according to a guy called Stephen Bender, who is a pain specialist in America. He studies specifically pain and its relation to sleep, how sleep affects your chronic pain sensory system. And he hasn't found any serious changes.
To snoozing.
Yeah.
I'm glad, because I think all of us, I don't know how many people, but probably 90% of us snooze. Who just wakes up when your alarm goes off? We're all no, just 5 more minutes, just 5.
Yeah. But that's also interesting, because just because science says no, you do feel groggy.
Yeah.
So we don't really know why that is. It might not be because you go into a whole big dream cycle and take 4 hours to wake up and whatever. There might just be something else we don't understand going on.
So we actually have quite a lot that we still want to talk about, bimodal sleep patterns and stuff. I don't know, do we have time to do that today? How much time do we have? So we don't. I just found out that we don't have any time left, unfortunately. So probably we're going to have to do a 3rd episode at some stage to just and by that time there might be even more evidence.
Probably.
At the rate that they're researching this topic. But for me, at the end of the day, I feel like what I want to conclude and say at the end of the day, what I take from all this research and everything that Massimo told me, is that we neglect listening to our bodies. We're so quick to think of what's the right thing to eat and what's the right amount of sleep. But if your body's craving something, like you said, you crave carbs when you need energy or whatever, then that's what you need right now. If you feel tired or depressed or down or whatever, maybe you need a little more sleep, maybe more than 8 hours, maybe 10 hours of sleep. But if you're really excited about life and going through a really good time and you're on holiday and whatever else, and you're super happy and you don't feel like sleeping because you're too excited or too happy to sleep, then maybe you don't need, 8 hours of sleep that night. I don't think not sleeping 8 hours in one night is gonna ruin your life. But, you should still try your best to sleep 8 hours a night after what I heard. And I didn't even know about this, but I feel very lucky that I, get 8 hours of sleep every night. But anyway, basically what I just also want to say is listen to your body. It'll tell you if it's tired. It'll tell you if it's not. And any last words from your side?
Really, I agree with you. And the only other thing I will say is don't be too hard on yourself. It's very difficult to get this right.
Yeah. And the thing is, you don't want to now stress so much about not getting enough sleep that stress is just making you sick or making you sleep less.
Exactly.
That's counterproductive. So don't stress about it too much. Just try your best.
Work with what you have and what you can do. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much,
again.
Massimo. I really, really learned a lot today, and I feel like this man is kind of like a walking Google. Every time, any topic that you want to know something about, you can ask him. He's probably read 10 articles about it.
Please listen to Talos Talks Shit for the Dunning-Kruger effect and why I may not be a walking Google.
Yes, be sure to tune into that as well. Feed Me Honesty is a South African lifestyle podcast hosted by Hazel Priscilla and produced with the generous assistance of Blended Podcasts, brought to you by Blended Audio. Goodbye.